Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video for the Fantasy Premier League season 2022-2023. So in this video we're going to be looking at an updated team selection draft. I've made some significant changes to my last one and wanted to showcase and share the new picks and the reasons why I've chosen who I've chosen. So let's jump into the first screen here, which is pretty much just showing the previous draft I showcased before. I wouldn't say really the draft has too many weak points. I was pretty happy with getting those two £8 million midfielder price points nailed in, with that £5 million price point of Kieran Trippier being one as well to consider. But overall, yeah, I was pretty happy. There was a couple of things to think about really for me, and that was just keep getting pre-season data and considering making some moves based on that information. Also with David Raya, one of the viewers kindly mentioned that Fabrizio Romano had tweeted about a Brentford keeper joining the team, which has now happened. I don't necessarily know if that 100% means David Raya is on the move or he'll have limited minutes based on this, but I think there is every potential he could be. So I wanted to explore essentially alternative options. Again, I put out another video which I'll link above for you to check out if you haven't checked that out. Just comparing essentially 5 different 4.5 million goalkeeping options and looking at the stats between them. So those were a couple of the points really that I wanted to think about over the past week or so. Yeah, we'll jump into the new draft. So based on those points, really the first thing I think that will probably jump out to most of you in this draft is the fact that there is no Erling Haaland. So I was definitely somebody that bought the hype really in terms of this man coming into the Premier League. I think he is still going to be a phenomenal talent and essentially a powerhouse in the Premier League. I still think he's going to produce a lot of quality for Man City. My problem or my concern really is on twofold. Is the first thing from an FPL perspective, we all want to get the best out of essentially the value that we're putting in any player. Haaland isn't necessarily on penalties, and I think that was kind of my first fear or my first kind of point that I wanted to raise. In terms of the Harry Kane versus Haaland debate, we know that Kane is going to be on penalties. Although Son did take one in the pre-season, I think that is just essentially just a pre-season thing. I'm pretty certain that Harry's going to be on the penalties again come the beginning of the season. I also think in terms of proven ability, we know that Harry Kane can and has produced some fantastic quality over the past few seasons and beyond. Haaland, yes, arguably is younger. He's maybe fresher. He's got that fight in him. He wants something. He's got something to prove. He isn't proven yet. So it gives me a little bit more of a kind of wait and see approach on him. And essentially, the third reason really is on ownership. And Kane is still sitting at a respectively lower ownership than Haaland, which is telling me that he's worth that differential pick for those first few weeks. If the ownership stays like that, at least up until game week 1, being at the same price point. And I think personally that he may match Haaland, if not outscore him in across those, say first 6 game weeks. That's without captaincy, of course. We know that Haaland and Salah rotated pretty well, and that is something to consider. But I think overall, I'm much more leaning towards Harry Kane now over Haaland. The next significant change really is that based on Liverpool's pre-season data, I haven't really seen enough of Luis Diaz. I don't think he's a bad option. I don't think that essentially you have to go with triple Liverpool either. I think that this is the first draft anyway I've kind of seen that doesn't either consider Luis Diaz or Robertson in it. I think pretty much triple Liverpool has been in most drafts that I've seen. But I think I can justify not having it really. And on the basis of like my previous video, I mentioned Jadon Sancho being kind of one to watch and one to think about. And I think he's justified my point even more. In recent weeks, Manchester United, it's clear to see that Erik ten Hag's system is working for these front three specifically or especially. The wing backs are also playing much, much better. Obviously, we've got Malacia that's just recently joined. I think Luke Shaw will be able to probably match the same type of output as him. And of course, Dalot, more than likely over Aaron Wan-Bissaka, is flourishing as well. So I think that he's a fantastic option. He's scored a few goals, no assists as of yet. I'm not sure if they would have been registered as assists in the FPL world, but certainly 2 goals is nothing to be sniffed at. He also, of course, could be Marcus Rashford for 1 million cheaper. You're still getting a Manchester United attacker, still getting a proven talent, you could say. Obviously, in recent seasons has fallen off slightly, but he does look absolutely phenomenal in terms of pre-season so far from what I've seen. But I think I wanted a Manchester United asset, I think, anyway. It's more exciting for me as a fan, and also as well, I think that we knew, or as supporters and maybe as football fans in general, we know what this young man can do. With the World Cup this year as well, I think he's going to have a lot to do to be able to essentially get into Gareth Southgate's starting 11. I think with the likes of Sterling going to Chelsea as well, trying to fight for minutes essentially, or trying to fight for a place in the England squad based on how many minutes they play for their Premier League sides, I don't think he's going to really want to budge from that. So I think Sancho's a good option. I think again we'll have to see in the first few weeks come the Premier League beginning, but I think I'm leaning much more towards him rather than one of the other 8 million midfielder options. Next up, we've got Zinchenko instead of Kieran Trippier. I've gone with this really just on the basis, well, there's 2 major reasons really. The first being the fact that it's a link-up. He's, of course, in this picture, he's still showcasing a Manchester City shirt, but he is, of course, an Arsenal player, as we know now. The first reason really is the same kind of principle I applied for having Jesus in the team in the early draft, is because they've both linked up with Arteta before when he was managing with Pep at City. He's now, of course, got this, almost his own philosophies on top of what he learned from Pep at Arsenal, and I think these 2 players will be respective of what Arteta wants to do, what he wants to achieve, the way he wants to play. They'll be familiar with that style, familiar with the training, probably very, very similar to some of the drills and things that Pep runs. So I think that's number 1 really for me, is that he's going to interlink into a system that I think is going to work for him. Second of all, he's been linked with a potential further forward midfielder role, but yet still remaining as a defender on FPL. Now, that's perfect for us as FPL managers. It means, especially if you get a kind of those 1-0 victories from a defensive output, it means not only does he get a clean sheet past that 60-minute mark, he potentially also gets an assist, or potentially almost gets the 3 bonus points as well, based on the attacking output, the chances created, and just how the bonus point system works overall. You find that Cancelo and other, Reece James, Trent, all these individuals get quite high scoring in terms of bonus points because they're so far up the pitch. They're creating chances, the passes are successful. They've got more to add to the game, which is why I think at £5 million, it makes sense to go with him. He's basically an Arsenal midfielder, and we know what he can produce. He already plays for Ukraine in that role, so I think he's a great option. Moving into Ruben Diaz next, I think he's really more of a sideways move, as is Reece James, which we'll get onto in a moment. I think really Diaz, overall, I would say between him and Laporte, the numbers are very, very similar. The stats don't really back up one over the other. They're very, very similar in that respect. It's really just a point that if John Stones ever contends for that kind of the next centre-back position, or he's looking good, and again, going back to an English player for the World Cup, maybe he wants to prove something and really does start pushing himself to another level, I think really Laporte is the one that's at risk. I don't think Diaz is. The numbers really as well were quite similar on the basis that Diaz had less minutes towards the end of the season when he picked up an injury. So I think Diaz would still slightly be above and a slight better option than Laporte if we took the whole season into consideration. So with bar injuries or any other data or anything else. So I think he's the option I'm going to go with as the sideways move. I think then Reece James over Ben Chilwell is realistically just because now I understand a little bit more about Chelsea's activity in the transfer market, and also based on pre-season data. It's really those 2 major reasons that have swung me in the Reece James camp. I think ultimately Ben Chilwell, he does need to return to full fitness. He did have a very nasty injury last season, which I think from who essentially the data I've been looking at, or people I've been kind of looking for assistance with, in terms of Chelsea's pre-season, the eye testers have suggested that he's looking a little bit off the mark in terms of fitness and speed as the rest of the Chelsea squad, which says to me that Tuchel may ease him in terms of the beginning of the season. We will have to keep an eye on that, though, of course, if he does become the better option. But I think Reece James is pretty nailed to essentially not lose many minutes, especially now as well. Again, the moves in the transfer market for Chelsea have meant they've got not necessarily backup, but first choice centre backs again, which means Reece James then doesn't have to slot in to the right centre back position, which was my initial worry when I put Chilwell in above him. So I think he comes in for that reason. We've then got finally Robert Sanchez in goal, potentially what most viewers may seem as a pretty boring pick, really, but goalkeepers for me are never really exciting. I don't think you can actually pull that many points from these guys. You get the occasional penalty save in terms of, it's really just down to luck. The save points, really, like I say, it's 1 point for every 3 saves. It's their ceiling for point scoring is very, very low anyway. So potentially, yes, he may be a boring pick, but out of the 4.5 million options, I think he's a solid one. I think he's pretty much a guaranteed starter for Brighton. So I think on that basis, he goes into the team. So a few things really to note. I think first and foremost, I just want, now I've summarised the team. What do you think about the Harry Kane and Erling Haaland situation? Do you agree with it? Do you think that reasoning is valid? Have you also considered Harry Kane? Have you swapped them both in and out multiple times? This is the first time, like I say, I've put Harry Kane into the draft really since making any drafts. And I think now I see him in my team, I kind of prefer it, as I was lacking a Spurs asset. And I did want that to happen. I couldn't find a way to get Son in without sacrificing in too many other positions. Whereas I think Kane is a more well-rounded pick, and also can move to Haaland quite simply at that same price point. Also, what do you think of Zinchenko? Are you going to consider him? Do you think that at 5 million as well, like I say, being an out of position midfielder or out of position defender in the game, that he's the number one pick? Is he essentially an unnegotiable? Does he get locked in straight away now? A few things to think about, and please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. So we'll just wrap it up essentially with some more kind of summary, I guess, of a few other players to think about. A few have already been mentioned already, but I think the first two I'll talk about are Cancelo and Marcus Rashford. So essentially I have Ruben Diaz and Sancho. I just find that Sancho may be a bit more of an exciting pick for me. Potentially I swap that towards the beginning of the season anyway and go for the Rashford Cancelo combo, but essentially both of them are priced the same in terms of total. So you take the million away from Jadon Sancho once you downgrade him to Marcus Rashford, and you put that million saved on top of Ruben Diaz to give you João Cancelo instead. So definitely a worthy City plus Manchester United asset combination. But let me know your thoughts as well in the comments on who or which double up you prefer, or not necessarily double up, but duo, I should say, that you like. Matty Cash and Kieran Trippier, I think at the 5 million mark, again, both of them should be considered. I think Matty Cash offers us the potential of that perfect wing back, attacking threat and output that we like to see. Aston Villa's fixtures also look very, very promising. And I think Kieran Trippier being on a lot of set pieces for Newcastle means his goal threat and potential point scoring is a lot higher than other defenders that are either lower or higher than him, or even in the same bracket. So I think, again, these two at 5 million are alternatives to Zinchenko. But again, let me know your thoughts on if you would choose these two over him. Haaland, of course, we've put him in there as a player option, just because I think everything that I've just mentioned between him versus the Kane debate, essentially, it's all valid, but he's still, like I say, an absolute powerhouse. He's going to smash it, I'm sure, at some point. It's just a case that at the moment I would like to sit back maybe for those first few weeks and see how he does. And last but not least, really, I wanted to put Anthony Martial into the mix, just because I think there's a couple of things to caveat him in terms of a selection on, really, and that's that, yes, a lot of this, again, for the front three of Manchester United is knee-jerky based on pre-season data. Also, there is a major concern about the fact that if Cristiano Ronaldo does stay at Manchester United, which is looking more and more likely with him just being linked to so many teams and nothing really happening in terms of the transfer window for him, he will probably get the nod over Martial for Ten Hag. I don't know that, of course, for a fact, but essentially it looks like when you have a player of Ronaldo's caliber, regardless of what Martial's doing in pre-season, it could just be that Ronaldo gets chosen. Do I think that's right? Maybe not, but essentially it's Ten Hag's decision. So we'll have to wait and see with him. I think at 7 million, he could potentially be an absolute steal. If Ronaldo does go, then I do think I would probably consider taking Sancho away and going with Martial instead at that 7 million mark. Although that being said as well, I would have to consider, I don't think 3 strikers really works. I don't like a triple up front, unless it's Haaland and Kane, really, in terms of a kind of freemium draft that I've seen previously. I don't like him instead of Jesus. I think Jesus is going to essentially, he will. I think early days, if we don't own him at this point, I think he's over 60% owned. He will kill the rank too quickly, I think, if he delivers early on. So I think he's a bit of a risk overall. Maybe again a more of a puntier pick than some of the others. But I thought again I would put him in here as one to watch. So guys, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope that you found the content useful. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much again for the support and watching the content. I really do appreciate it. Of course, if you're new around here, please do subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and it just means essentially that I can keep creating content for you guys, and I know that you're enjoying the content still. Of course, the last thing to note as well is apologies for any returning viewer or new viewer if you're checking out the channel for the first time. Bit of a gap in terms of content this week, just because I've had to go away to London for a couple of days with work. So apologies for that, but back at it again this weekend, hopefully creating some more content for you guys. And finally, if you haven't already, then the mini league code is at the bottom there underneath me. So please feel free to join that for obviously a little bit of fun through the season. So again, thanks very much for watching, guys. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.